A few weeks ago, we did a show on doing business in Africa, and we were looking at the risks of moving into Africa and doing business on the continent. We got a huge response to that, so we thought we'd get in some experts and start drilling down into this whole thing of risk and what it really is. Praveck Geeanpersadh is the director in risk advisory at Deloitte, and Volker von Widdern joins us as well. He's MD of Risk Consulting, Middle East and Africa for Marsh Risk Consulting. Firstly, let's identify this. What is risk?
A risk is a combination of stuff, but before we just slate it, risk is there for a very good reason. The old adage of high risk, high return is so relevant to Africa. So it's really not a bad thing. The problem with risk is its volatility and its unpredictability. And when I look at the landscape of Africa, there's so many factors that go into it. Africa has got so many cultures, states, so many different political nuances. It makes it difficult for an investor to look at the landscape and make a decision on where to invest. Is
the cultural aspect of risk really a big factor in it?
Yes, I think it comes from the external part, the nature of the environment, as well as the orientation of the corporate and its own development of a risk culture internally. From the point of view of honesty, ethics, mean what you say, do what you want to do. So there are a lot of those factors that are very important from a cultural point of view.
How then do I as a corporate, let's say I own a tire business, how do I then work out what my risks are of moving into Africa?
Yeah, well, again, we have to borrow something from law enforcement, and the entire thing about intelligence gathering is so relevant to doing business in Africa. Understanding the environment, researching it, investing in it, taking time, having the patience to understand what you're getting into is specifically relevant to Africa. So if you're in the tire business, from understanding the revenue potential and the market, understand also that there will be regulation and there will be issues that will block your potential growth strategy, that there will be issues such as taxation and setup costs and the things that make it difficult for a startup business. And then once you get operational, be mindful of the landmine that is Africa. Everything from fraud, corruption, as a whole, it's a myriad of things that you have to really apply your mind to. But the key things are investment, having the patience and the time to really look into things, and then understanding that the return will come, but you can never get rid of risk in Africa.
So what do you guys do now?
Well, in that same example, you start with the basics.
And you would advise. I would get you on as a consultant, and you would advise me
on the risk issues. So
yeah.
we'd take all these issues that are being discussed and perhaps just start with the absolute basics. How will the stock get to where you want to go? Zambia, wherever you want to go. Do they manufacture tires in Zambia? Perhaps not to the brand that you like or you want to sell. So the whole issue goes around logistics and even licensing and marketing agreements and protecting the basic infrastructure of the business.
We always get told that South Africa is one of the most difficult countries to start business in from international investors. Is that the same throughout Africa?
No, we hear from various sources that it is easier to start businesses outside or above South Africa and below sub-Saharan Africa. So the entry points are relatively easy. Depending on where you want to be in a trading environment, I think it's fairly straightforward. In the financial services sectors, I think regulation is stronger, and I think appropriately so. They're trying to build local capacity and capability. So it balances, again, the environment, what you're trying to achieve, and know the country that you want to deal with, and make sure that you've got issues around distribution, payment certainty, your client base, and even things like your core contractual capabilities. Those are the basic fundamentals you're trying to make sure that you get right before you do all the fancy stuff.
The logistical side of it must be a nightmare. Yeah. We're going to be getting on to talking about the risk in freight itself in the second half of the program. That's a specific area we wanted to look at. But the whole logistics of getting your product, as we were saying earlier, from Johannesburg to Lagos, must be an absolute nightmare.
It is. But it's not different to getting your hardware and your consumables to Hong Kong, for that matter. The problem is that Africa has its unique socioeconomic issues. So people are more susceptible to corruption, to fraud. There's briberies at borders. Taxes may be higher. It's a less regulated environment, which means that your business is prone to so many more variables that you would if you went to an established or mature market, Hong Kong, London, or New York. So there are means to get it to any port and any destination in Africa. It might be just a little bit more expensive. It may take a little bit more time. You'll have to be a bit more savvy about understanding the people and the environment that you'll be entering. Africa requires that. You have to be so savvy. You have to be street smart. You can't just be, sit without being belittling the corporate executive. You have to understand what happens at an operational level. It's when you understand that business in Africa becomes far more tangible and profitable.
You see, all I'm hearing here are headaches.
There are solutions, though. The issue is understanding that you're dealing with another set of variables, and you need plan, B, C, and D, and you need to be able to respond depending on the curveballs that come your way. And they are practical, and I think in the sense a lot of the opportunity, and you go right back to your first question about what risk is. Well, risk is the effect of uncertainty on your future outcomes, but it's also opportunity. So Africa provides opportunities for much better pricing if you want to sell, you much lesser competition. The issue is be prepared, as we're discussing now, and be able to respond in a variety of ways. It could be that there's a critical element of your business that you must have in place. And those things are soluble, and we often come from an environment where we have more resources. We understand it better. So if we prepare ourselves better and we go ahead, we do very well. I mean, look at South African businesses that are doing well, ShopRite and the like. But there are others that, that have had challenges in terms of payment certainty, others like Supergroup. So I'm not saying that there's always, generalization one or the other way, but it can be done well. Prepare yourself well, and I think we've got to debunk ourselves of the generalizations that we start with here, really understand where you're going to, and make sure that you've got the ability to respond in a variety of ways. And then it can be done.
I suppose we really are acting the way that we hate being reacted to by first world countries, where they make generalizations about South Africa.
Exactly.
And we're just doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's not.
It's a pattern that we've just adopted.
Absolutely.
There are, you mentioned ShopRite. I mean, Pick n Pay, Spar, MTN, Vodacom, the banks are all piling in.
Yes, yeah.
So they must have obviously done their work. If these guys see the opportunity, is there opportunity for the small, medium enterprise to start moving into Africa?
Absolutely. If you look at, look at what we do and Africa does in terms of exporting first world products. Every night they fly roses from Kenya into the London markets. That starts with people who just pay enormous attention to the quality, the delivery, and all the rest of it. And that often just takes human commitment to get it right. And I don't think it takes massive corporate infrastructure. It's trusting the promise that's being made at a certain level. Yes, obviously, as businesses grow in scale or complexity, you need a bit of horsepower behind them. But it starts with that ability to say, we will deliver according to a particular recipe or outcome, and it can be done.
I know you're in the risk side of it, but what are the biggest markets in Africa for South African goods?
Well, there's a number of indicators. Firstly, the biggest investors into Africa are the Indian and Chinese communities. I think as at 2009, China had invested well over 100 billion into Africa, and India's just over half of that. Now, the key territories seem to be those that are blessed with natural resources. Nigeria for its oil and gas. On the East African coast, a similar story with now Uganda having an oil exploration. Angola, significant amounts of investment going in there. And then some of the states that have other natural resources, mining resources like Zambia, etc. Those seem to be the destinations for investment. And it makes sense that where you have these oases of economic activity, there'll be feeder businesses that thrive off it. So that's where the investment seems to be going into. For the average guy in South Africa looking to foray into Africa, you got to look at the troubles around our neighboring states. Zimbabwe is a key example. Now, Zimbabwe is well documented for all the problems it has, but it creates opportunity. And if you come back to the early example of logistics, that must be a huge opportunity for the local businessman to expand his businesses into foreign territories.
accessibility comes back to the logistics issue again. I mean, it's all very well getting your goods to Maputo, but to get them to Beira is another story.
Sure. But someone needs the stuff in Beira.
Yeah,
there's
true.
a market there, and they understand that there are challenges of reaching them. So they may accept a 6-week delivery time versus a 6-day delivery time in South Africa. It's horses for courses. So if you say that's the case, and dear sir, if you want this level of quality delivery and this level of outcome,
that's what you're
it
going to pay.
may just cost us a bit more money, or these are the additional services that we recommend to you from a risk point of view, we add to your process. They can accept or not accept the outcome. I think they're all pragmatic solutions, and that's the issue. It's not a case of saying filling in a form, or I've got an outsourced contract, or I'm going to buy off the shelf here. You pay more attention to the process from A to Z, and then you have maybe a 90% chance of successful outcome. Whereas here, the standard here is, oh, I want something, pick up the phone, get it, and tomorrow I do something else. Yeah. The opportunity in Africa is saying, pay attention, give the client real first-hand service, and anyone can do it. And I think service is what everybody wants, a trustworthy supplier. And that's the opportunity for all of us. That's where the man in the street always outcompetes the big organization, because they can give you that personal attention.
Do you think that maybe, just maybe, because we've got so used to the levels of service that we have in South Africa, that we've become a bit complacent about the service aspect into Africa, and we've got to take a few steps back and start working on that now?
Yeah, I think that's so true. Yeah. I've been in Lagos this last few months. I've been to Kenya and Nairobi over the last few weeks as well. And the thing that strikes you the most is about the level of service those individuals offer expatriates and businessmen. I think Nigerians suffer a bad rap. One of the most friendliest people that you'll ever meet. And their attention to service is so high. And when you're there in those states, you look back at what we have in South Africa, and you think, yeah, maybe we're a bit arrogant, maybe we're a bit complacent, because, you know, an African community is going to be forged very soon, and we may be lacking because of that service element.
Yeah, I mean, you can understand once you've been up through Africa and get back to South Africa, why so many people would like to be part of this community, because of the infrastructure that we have. You know, driving in out of Zimbabwe, and you suddenly get onto the South African highways, and this is heaven on earth.
If you take the business model point the other way around, and say, look, we have procurement engines here, quoting engines, relatively impersonal things, but they're all driven on the point of price efficiency, delivery, quality benchmarks, and things like that, and they're global models, and we are adopting them for one or other purpose. There may be other models that are quite effective in neighboring countries that are not those kind of impersonal models, but do just as well, because the procurement engine might be achieving a return for a highly transactional service. The service model may achieve a very much higher return for a different kind of relationship. And I think that's a generalization point again. The risk side of it, of course, is the dependency. So John Smith in wherever may move to another company, or may not trust the IP that you're giving them, and may take it away for their own benefit. And you've got to decide how much you're going to invest in that relationship and what plans B, C, and D are about. So I think the servicing issues are another family of relationships and behaviors that you've got to almost re-familiarize yourself compared to the automated business that we might do somewhere else.
You're going forward over the next 10, 15, 20 years. What do you think is going to be the highest risk in Africa?
I think the unregulated environment. I think businesses the market will open up. I think there'll be a greater community that goes into Africa. And I think that's going to create competition, but I don't think that'll be tightly regulated. And I think regulation stems from political will. So political stability might just, or instability rather, might just be the Achilles heel for the African growth model.
Praveck, Volker, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
You're welcome.